today we're going to be talking about my 7th grader's personal reading list for this upcoming school year. Caroline is turning 13 this year, so she is entering 7th grade and she's going to be tackling more difficult subjects, so her books are going to be reflecting that. For this list, I'm going to be mentioning any books that contain any hard language. None of these books have any sexual content that I'm aware of. I read them myself, so no, they don't. Some of them can be occasionally violent. So, you might want to use your own discretion, but I will mention it at the beginning. For historical fiction, I'm going to be having her read Witch on Blackbird Pond. This is actually meant for 5th and 6th grade readers. When you have a slow literary piece like this, it's always a good idea to wait a couple of years. This is fantastic literature. There's beautiful dialogue, great vocabulary words. This is also an excellent introduction into Puritan life and what it was like before America was America. So because there is a little mention of witch trials, there is talk about drowning and hanging and that sort of nature. But it is not a devil advocating book by any means. But it does talk about religious conviction and what that means and where do we have our pulls between mercy and justice. So there's some really great themes in this book. Is it hot where you're at? Because I am just like, it is so hot outside. Okay, this next book I'm super excited for Caroline to read. It's called The Outsiders by S.E. Hilton. The woman that wrote it was 15. She was 15 years old when she wrote this, and it was published when she was 17 years old. I think it's so important that children are exposed to great literature, but also exposed to literature that is written by kids their own age. It's well written, but not in the traditional sense. There is mild violence in it, and by mild I mean there's gang war. There's gang war, there is a murder, but that is not graphically portrayed. There's great themes in this book of understanding compassion and what it means to stay golden. Robert Frost's poem is quoted in this book. And so he explores that idea of what that means. Maybe stay true to ourselves, but also stay shiny and gold, to have that still empathy and not be tarnished by hard things that happen to you. Oh, I'm not kidding. I am just like sweating my guts out. Heart of the Samurai is a new book to me. I had not read it until this year, and I am so glad I did. Historical fiction done right. That's what Heart of the Samurai rings true to me. There's no hard language in it. As far as I could tell, there's nothing that would upset anybody. There is discussion of racism and prejudice, and I love the way it's done. In Japan, at this time period, the borders were blocked off. This young boy, a fisherman, is stranded outside of Japan, is picked up by whalers and brought to America because he knows he will not be accepted back into his home country. And he faces prejudice and discrimination there. I think takes place in 1820 or something. And there's a brief thought process that he has. He thinks it's kind of funny that people look down on me here, whereas if they went to Japan, people would look down on them there. It's really telling, and it's beautifully written. Another thing that I really love about it is that it actually takes his drawings, Manjiro's drawings, and posts them throughout the book, so you get a chance to see what he actually drew. It also has a picture of the whaler who picked him up, the captain who saved him. It gives it richness, and it's just a phenomenal book for that reason. For historical nonfiction, I'm going to be having her read A Long Walk to Water. This book I just barely read this past year, and it is so inspiring and just so powerful in the way it is written. It is a harder book because it is covering genocide and the struggles that people were having in Sudan and Darfur, tribal warfare essentially. And this young boy is being forced to walk to a refugee camp. It's a great example of human endurance and compassion and forgiveness. The next book I'm going to be having Caroline read is The Diary of Anne Frank. There is a chapter in there about girls developing. You may want to check it out if you have your young teenage boy reading it, but it's nothing unusual. This is absolutely the experience of a teenage girl, and for me it brings home the fact that she was just like us as teenagers, and yet she had to experience this horrific event in history. And I thought this would be excellent if she's going to be reading The Diary of Anne Frank to juxtapose that with The Hiding Place by Corrine ten Boom. I think having those two stories will really help bring home the difficulties that were faced. There's great Christian themes in this of love and forgiveness as well as just standing up for truth and for helping those who need help. I will say there is a brief discussion about sex between her and her father, but it is very, very superficial. In fact, nothing is gone into detail. It's more about him talking to her about what's appropriate as a child to know, and that she does not have to carry that burden quite yet. Just being aware of that it is in there. For fantasy, I'm going to be having her read The Squire's Tales by Gerald Morris. The Squire's Tales are hilarious. Just really good pleasure reading. This is going deep into Arthurian legend. He pulls from French poetry and from British Isle poetry and also from T.H. White's The Once and Great Future King. So The Squire's Tale is the first one, and it follows a squire and his knight and their kind of adventures. Hilarious, and an excellent introduction into that Arthurian legend. For classical fiction, I'm going to be having her read Cheaper by the Dozen. This is just a fun pleasure reading kind of book. It's very well written, and I think it reflects a home life that she's very familiar with. We don't have 12, we have 6. The parental philosophies that I've talked about in there, I think she'll recognize and appreciate and find hilarious. In fact, if she wasn't reading it this year, I probably would have this as a read aloud, because I think my kids would really get a kick out of the eccentric father and the things he talks about. I'm also going to be having her read Little Women. This is great classical literature. It is pushing her reading level, and it has great vocabulary. It's also got a little bit of history involved during the time period. It's got great Christian themes. The reason why I love this book is because it shows different avenues women can take and still have value. So you have Meg, who gets married and has children, and her life still has value. You have Jo, who does not choose that path, who goes to New York and is going to become a writer and get a job and is exploring life that way, and it still has value. You have Amy, who goes and marries somebody who's wealthy and she's going to do the rich lady thing, and you have Beth, who decides to stay at home and live a simple, calm life. And all of those things, no matter who you are or where you are, they all have value and are worth it. If that is the path you choose. The mystery book that I selected for her to read this year is Sweetness at the Bottom of the Pie by Alan Bradley, that's his name. This is a great book series. It is going to be pushing her abilities a little bit because it is geared towards an older audience. There is no bad language in this. It is very clean as far as mystery goes. There is a murder. There is a child that is kidnapped. The main character is Flavia DeLuce, who is I believe she's a 10 or 11-year-old girl who solves the mystery. And her voice is so distinct. This book is an excellent example of character development. It is great writing structure, and it shows the mystery plot line very well. In fact, the rest of the book series is also very good, is very clean, and I would highly recommend it for anybody to read. I mean, even as an adult, you should read these books. They're really fabulous. For science fiction, I'm going to be having her read Ender's Game by Orson Scott Card. Ender's Game, what you need to know is that it does have language, and it also does have violence and extreme bullying. And for that reason, I also wouldn't have it as an audiobook, just because you don't want to listen to it or have, a younger sibling pass by. The reason why I included this one in particular is because it is a phenomenal science fiction book. Explores the complexities of war, and it explores compassion and forgiveness and what it means to misinterpret the enemy and to, see the other side. Ender's Game is literally a journey of him trying to understand who he is fighting with in order to get in their mind and defeat them, right? But also he learns to love these buggers, these aliens. Ender's Game is also an excellent introduction into political strategy and being manipulated for the masses, and kind of exposing that idea of people in power playing different sides and trying to move and sway the public into your own way of thinking. And for a younger audience, which Ender's Game is meant for, that's literally unheard of, and I think is also important to kind of bring that idea about. For science nonfiction, I'm actually torn between having her read Jane Goodall's autobiography. It's a really long autobiography and I haven't quite finished it yet. I think it might be a little too grown up for her. So I'm thinking what I might do is What the Robin Knows. I think this will be a really great companion piece for her when we're doing our hiking trails. Oh, just nature studies that we have been doing for so many years. So those are the books that I picked out for my 7th grader to read this year. I hope this list was helpful. If it was, like, subscribe. Tell me down in the comments, what are your favorite books to read, and are you having your 7th grader read them? If you have any more suggestions, I would love to hear it. I'm still, I'm happy to tweak this list. Sometimes I put these up and I'm like, maybe I'll do this instead. So if you have some other suggestions, I would be all ears to hear about them. I hope you guys have a fantastic week. Take it easy, everybody. Bye.